From literature to movies, the audience tends to enjoy murder mysteries, and Jigsaw is a motive in your movie.
Yeah.
And I can imagine that balancing two timelines and which information to reveal at a particular time and engaging audience to discover who done it must be a creative puzzle by itself. I would like you to discuss, to start the process of structuring the script and rendering on screen.
Well, it's an adaptation, and it was a challenging adaptation because the book of Mirrors by Eugene Chiravici, upon which the story is based, the book told the story differently. It had three different characters. The character that Russell plays, you don't meet him until the third installment, the last 100 pages of the book. So the first thing that we did was we kind of relensed the narrative through the character of Roy Freeman that Russell plays. So that was its own challenge. There was, the decision of whether you should ever sort of be omniscient with the storytelling, which is put the viewer ahead of Russell's character at any point in time, or cut away to other characters and their storylines. And there were iterations of the script where we did in fact do that. But what I felt like that did ultimately was it kind of disadvantaged the protagonist, and in fact made it more difficult in many ways to sort of juggle all those puzzle pieces. So what I really wanted to do was I wanted to have the viewer in lockstep with Russell's character. So you don't get any information that he doesn't get, especially, with the character who's bereft of memory and is being sort of, called back in time in a way to reinvestigate the past, because he himself is a blank slate in that regard. I wanted the audience to also be a blank slate. So it kind of made things easier in terms of juggling those puzzle pieces because the audience is only getting pieces when Russell gets them. So that's really what I tried to do.
You have addressed previously and in interviews that Roy is a character in crisis. I like that. I like that statement. And it could be someone in a question that is pointed in the script. Was I a good cop? I imagine it's a major point in your script, the question itself. And narrative-wise, I feel the crisis is presented by a forgetful character that needs to remember, and third parties that wish him to forget, to keep the dead buried. And so you have to balance it.
Yeah.
That brings me to a number of movies, Nolan's Memento, Scorsese's Shutter Island, to name a few.
Yeah.
How did memory came to be a major part of your adaptation, Alzheimer and procedurals and stuff? And how do you think it can help to keep the audience guessing until the very end?
I was really interested in the role that memory and the awareness of our past plays in shaping who we are as people and the choices that we make. I really liked that. I really liked this idea that our memory of things past is often not an accurate recollection of what happened. That personality and our own traumas and our own experiences play a role in how we remember things that have happened to us, and that other people who might have experienced the same event might remember it differently than we do, which is a big part of this movie. But what I really liked was, this idea that a man who's bereft of memory, who has to investigate something and interface with other people who remember him, but he doesn't remember them, he's in a very vulnerable position, right? Because he doesn't know who is friend and who is foe. He's looking to others to kind of jog his own memory and give him context. But they all have their own agendas, which is, I think, something that contributes to kind of the mystery element of the film. He's on this investigation, but it's like he's investigating it for the very first time, even though he's lived it once before. Memory was a big part of the underlying source material. The Weeder character, as played by Marton Chokish in the film, was really the center of that. sort of the study and sort of trauma and a person's instinct to either repress or suppress that trauma. That was all embedded in the source material. And it was really fun to get to explore that through a character who has Alzheimer's.
I like noir movies. I guess Hollywood is built upon three major genres, and noir probably is one of them. And I'm impressed by your control. You have written scripts, but this is your first work behind the camera. And I love the anamorphic lenses that kind of distorted the environment and the expressive use of color. And I'd like to talk more about it, especially how did you came up with the green color? I guess the green color is a color that's more pervasive throughout the movie. You can see very instances of green and very expressive way.
Thank you for saying all that. I didn't really set out to make a noir movie per se. I sort of set out to tell a story about this character, and then it felt like those visual elements were sort of the best choices as it related to sort of telling that story. But there are two timelines in the movie, and each of the timelines have a different look and a different lens package around them. So everything that takes place in the present tense of the story was shot anamorphically, and everything that takes place in the past was shot with spherical lenses. They're both vintage lens sets that had been rehoused. The anamorphic lenses were these Kowa lenses from the 1960s that were rehoused, and the spherical lenses were these Minoltas from the 70s. They both, had a fair amount of bleed in them, which is why we got all that lens flare in the film. I wanted the world of Roy and the present tense of the story, the stuff we shot anamorphically, to be really desaturated, really grim, a lot of green, grays, blues, lots of shadow play throughout the film. The stuff in the past, because it mostly is taking place in and around this college environment, I wanted to be very sort of woody and warm, amber, gold, browns, sort of really rich and sort of textured. And I wanted there to be a real distinction between the two timelines, because the present tense timeline is really speaking to Roy's experience. So we start out really desaturated in the present tense, and then as the story goes on, as Roy starts to find out more things, more color starts to sort of bleed in to the film. I don't know if you noticed it, but at the end of the film, when he's really recalling what happened in the past, there's this moment where the color literally drains from his face, which we did in the DI and color timing. We manipulated that in post-production. But I had a wonderful, wonderful DP, this guy named Ben Knott, who was really incredible. So I was lucky.
You mentioned lens flare, and lens flare tends to be just something to play with. But in the movie, lens flare looks like a memory that glimpses. It's something very useful narratively and also stylistically. I like that. Let's gossip just a little bit, not too much, because I've read elsewhere that Mel Gibson and Nicolas Cage were being considered to play Roy, and now I can only imagine how it would be. It would change the movie entirely. I can't imagine anyone other than Russel Crowe to play the character of Roy Freeman, because he has a gravitas, and he physically embodies the character. You can see how he suppresses dialogue in favor of presence, in favor of, I guess, the emotions he can convey with his face, with his grim. And if the rumor was true, I don't know if it is, how many changes did you bring to the script to mold it for Russel Crowe persona, and how was to work with him?
I think it's possible that those guys were on a list at one point in time, but I never met with them. I don't think we ever submitted the script to them. Russell was just such an incredible, incredible get. I mean, when you're dealing with a character who has Alzheimer's, you're dealing with a list of actors who are all in a certain age range. So I think Nicolas Cage and Mel Gibson were on early lists at one point in time, but we never walked down that road. We didn't really, I didn't adjust the character to sort of really specifically suit Russell in any specific way. The inverse is really more true, that Russell brought just a ton to what wasn't on the page, you know. But I didn't, he had lots of really sort of smart notes and, you know, suggestions for the character and, you know, things that embodied, you know, Roy's world. But working with Russell was exhilarating. It was exciting and also kind of terrifying as a first-time filmmaker to be working with somebody of sort of, you know, Russell's notoriety and talent. And I mean, he's a total legend. That word is overused in Australia. Everybody is called a legend, but I mean, he really is one. You know, just gifted, great actor, wonderful collaborator. It was a great experience.
I'm creating a list entitled 1001 Movies to Watch Before You Die because it's such a popular name. But I'd like you to contribute to this
Okay.
list with a lesser known movie that you kept close to your heart. Not that Paramount movies we usually talk about, such as Taxi Driver, 2001, but maybe a much lesser known one, please.
Time of the Gypsies, which is a movie that's directed by a Bosnian filmmaker named Emir Kusturica. It was probably early 90s. Great movie. Time of the Gypsies. It'll be hard to find.
Okay, but it would be worth it.